1963 wasn't just another year in Hollywood, it was a cinematic crossroads. Old-school studio grandeur was clashing with bold new storytelling risks. Epic Western landscapes stood beside intimate romantic dramas. Animation reinvented medieval legend, while political thrillers questioned global power. Superstars ruled the screen, but quieter masterpieces slipped through the cracks. Some films became legends. Others became hidden treasures waiting to be rediscovered. And today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 unforgettable 1963 classics. These are the throwback gems you might have missed, but absolutely shouldn't. The Sword and the Stone, 1963. Released at a time when animation was evolving both technically and creatively, The Sword and the Stone marked a pivotal chapter for Walt Disney Productions, being the final animated feature personally overseen by Walt Disney before his death in 1966. Loosely adapted from T.H. White's Arthurian novel, the film reimagines the legend of King Arthur not as a grand medieval epic, but as a charming coming-of-age fantasy centered on a young orphan nicknamed Wart. What makes this film so compelling isn't just its magical premise of a boy destined for greatness, but its focus on education, mentorship, and personal growth through the eccentric wizard Merlin, whose time-traveling knowledge and absent-minded brilliance inject humor and intelligence into every scene. The animation style reflects a transitional Disney era, utilizing xerography, a cost-saving technique first seen in 101 Dalmatians, which gave the film a rougher, sketch-like aesthetic that feels distinct from the polished fairy tales of the 1950s. While critics at the time were divided, often comparing it unfavorably to earlier Disney masterpieces, audiences gradually embraced its wit, energetic pacing, and memorable sequences, especially the wizard's duel between Merlin and the delightfully vain Madame Mim, which remains one of Disney's most imaginative magical battles. The film's episodic structure, focusing on Wart's transformations into a fish, squirrel, and bird, serves not only as visual spectacle, but as layered life lessons about intellect over strength, emotional awareness, and perspective. Musically, the Sherman Brothers delivered playful songs that enhance the film's lighthearted tone without overwhelming its narrative drive. Despite lacking the sweeping romance typical of Disney fairy tales, The Sword and the Stone carved its own identity through humor, character chemistry, and philosophical undertones about leadership and wisdom. Over the decades, its reputation has significantly improved, with modern viewers appreciating its subtle intelligence and character-driven storytelling. Today, it stands as an underrated Disney experiment, less about Destiny's spectacle and more about the quiet shaping of character before greatness emerges. In the broader context of 1963 cinema, it represents animation holding its ground against big-budget epics and adult dramas, proving that even in a year of widescreen spectacles, a hand-drawn fantasy about a scrawny boy and a forgetful wizard could quietly endure across generations. The Caretakers is one of 1963's most emotionally intense and socially conscious dramas, shifting away from glamour and spectacle to confront the harsh realities of mental illness and institutional care in mid-20th century America. Directed by Hall Bartlett and based on Dariel Telfer's novel, the film is set inside a psychiatric hospital, where patients, doctors, and nurses struggle not only with treatment but with ethics, authority, and the emotional weight of human suffering. The story follows Dr. Donovan McLeod, played by Robert Stack, a progressive but emotionally conflicted psychiatrist who arrives at the institution with idealistic intentions of reforming outdated and often inhumane treatment practices. Opposing him is Dr. Frederick A. Barker, portrayed by Joan Crawford in a commanding and stern performance, representing the traditional, rigid approach to psychiatric care that prioritizes discipline and control over empathy. Their ideological conflict forms the backbone of the narrative, exposing deep divisions within medical philosophy during a time when psychiatry itself was undergoing major transformation. Alongside them, the film explores the lives of patients inside the hospital, portraying their conditions with a mix of sensitivity and dramatic intensity that was considered bold for its era. Joan Crawford's performance stands out not only for its authority, but also for its emotional restraint, revealing a character shaped by years of professional burnout and hardened realism. Robert Stack brings moral urgency to his role, portraying a man torn between compassion and institutional limitations. The film does not shy away from difficult subject matter, including controversial treatment methods of the time, such as electroconvulsive therapy and physical restraints, presenting them in a way that forces audiences to question the ethics of medical authority.
Visually, The Caretakers adopts a stark and grounded style, using the hospital environment itself as a symbol of confinement and psychological pressure. Unlike many films of the early 1960s, it avoids escapism and instead leans into discomfort, creating a viewing experience that feels deliberately challenging. Upon release, the film received mixed to positive reviews, with critics acknowledging its ambition and social relevance while debating its melodramatic tone. However, it gained attention for bringing mental health discussions into mainstream cinema at a time when such topics were often avoided or stigmatized. In the broader context of 1963, The Caretaker stands apart from the year's epics and romantic dramas by focusing entirely on internal human struggle rather than external spectacle. Today, it is often viewed as an early example of Hollywood's gradual shift toward more realistic and socially aware storytelling, paving the way for later films that would explore mental health with greater nuance. Though not as widely remembered as other classics of its era, it remains an important and haunting portrait of a system and its patients caught between compassion and control. Its emotional weight lingers long after the final scene, making it one of the more quietly powerful entries in early 1960s cinema.
Irma la Douce, 1963. In 1963, director Billy Wilder delivered something wildly unexpected, a romantic comedy set in the underbelly of Parisian nightlife, filled with color, satire, moral absurdity, and irresistible charm. Irma la Douce reunited Wilder with Jack Lemmon and Shirley MacLaine after their explosive success in The Apartment. But instead of corporate cynicism, this time the story unfolded in a stylized, almost storybook version of Paris, where love blooms in the most unconventional circumstances. Lemmon plays Nestor Patou, an idealistic and hilariously naive police officer who stumbles into the city's red light district and accidentally disrupts its carefully balanced ecosystem of pimps and prostitutes. After losing his job, Nestor falls hopelessly in love with Irma, a spirited and independent prostitute played with warmth and magnetic confidence by MacLaine. What follows is a comedic spiral of jealousy and absurdity as Nestor invents an alter ego, a wealthy British aristocrat named Lord X, to become Irma's exclusive client, hoping to save her while secretly funding the arrangement himself. The brilliance of the film lies in Wilder's sharp screenplay, which balances farce with surprising tenderness, exposing hypocrisy while still celebrating genuine affection. The production design transforms Paris into a vibrant theatrical playground with bold colors and exaggerated sets that feel intentionally artificial, emphasizing the film's satirical tone rather than gritty realism. Lemmon's physical comedy reaches new heights here, particularly in scenes where he must switch between Nestor and his fabricated persona, delivering layered humor that feels both ridiculous and strangely touching. MacLaine, meanwhile, brings emotional grounding to Irma, ensuring she never feels like a caricature, but rather a woman navigating her circumstances with dignity and wit. The film runs longer than most comedies of its era, yet its pacing remains energetic due to Wilder's precise direction and clever dialogue. Upon release, Irma la Douce was a major commercial success, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of 1963, even though critics were initially divided over its risque subject matter and tonal shifts. It earned multiple Academy Award nominations and won for Best Costume Design, a testament to its lavish visual style. Over time, it has gained recognition as one of Wilder's boldest experiments, blending adult themes with mainstream accessibility in a way few directors could manage so effortlessly. Beyond its comedic surface, the film subtly critiques societal judgment, romantic obsession, and the illusion of control within relationships. In the context of 1963 cinema, surrounded by epic westerns and heavy dramas, Irma la Douce stood out as a sophisticated yet playful exploration of love in unlikely places, proving that even in morally complicated settings, humanity and humor could shine through. Today, it remains a fascinating snapshot of Hollywood daring to flirt with taboo subjects while still wrapping them in elegance and star power.
How the West Was Won, 1963. Few films in 1963 were as ambitious, as technically daring, or as overwhelmingly grand in scope as How the West Was Won, a sprawling Western epic that wasn't just a movie, but a cinematic event. Shot in the revolutionary three-camera Cinerama process, the film was designed to be experienced on massive curved screens, immersing audiences in sweeping landscapes, thundering buffalo stampedes, and roaring rivers in a way no traditional format could replicate. Directed by a rare collaboration of filmmaking giants, including Henry Hathaway, John Ford, and George Marshall, the film tells a multi-generational saga of one family's journey across decades of American expansion, tracing the transformation of the West from untamed wilderness to industrialized civilization.
Its ensemble cast reads like a roll call of classic Hollywood royalty: James Stewart, Gregory Peck, Debbie Reynolds, Henry Fonda, John Wayne, and more, each bringing gravitas and charisma to interconnected chapters that feel both intimate and monumental. Unlike standard westerns of the era that focused on lone gunslingers or small-town conflicts, this film aimed to capture the mythic sweep of American history itself, covering river travel, Civil War battles, railroad expansion, and the relentless push toward modernity. The narrative structure is episodic yet cohesive, moving through generations with a sense of inevitability, emphasizing both the triumph and the cost of expansion. The action sequences were groundbreaking for their time, particularly the Buffalo Stampede scene, which remains one of the most technically complex practical set pieces ever filmed. Alfred Newman's sweeping musical score amplifies the sense of destiny and scale, turning every landscape into something operatic. Critically, the film was praised for its spectacle and ambition, earning multiple Academy Award nominations and winning for Best Story and Screenplay written directly for the screen. Commercially, it was a massive success, becoming one of the highest-grossing films of the year and solidifying the Western as a prestige genre. Yet what makes How the West Was Won particularly fascinating today is how it balances myth-making with moments of human vulnerability, portraying not just conquest, but sacrifice, loss, and generational change. It serves as both celebration and elegy, acknowledging the harsh realities beneath the romanticized frontier legend. Over time, it has come to symbolize the final era of large-scale studio epics before the grittier New Hollywood movement reshaped American cinema later in the decade. Watching it now feels like stepping into a time capsule of Hollywood ambition, where technological experimentation met star power and historical storytelling on a scale rarely attempted since. In the landscape of 1963 cinema, it stood as proof that the studio system could still produce overwhelming spectacle, even as cultural shifts were quietly beginning to challenge its dominance.
The VIPs, 1963. Released at the height of the Jet Age glamour era, The VIPs is a glossy ensemble drama that traps a constellation of high-profile characters inside a snowbound London airport lounge, turning a weather delay into a pressure cooker of secrets, betrayals, and emotional reckonings. Directed by Anthony Asquith and produced by Anatole de Grunwald, the film was famously inspired by a real-life incident involving Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton being stranded by fog at Heathrow Airport, and that off-screen romance only fueled the public fascination surrounding the film's release. Taylor stars as Frances Andros, a sophisticated yet emotionally torn wife planning to leave her powerful, wealthy husband, played with commanding intensity by Burton, while boarding a flight with her lover. But when thick fog grounds all departures, the airport becomes a gilded cage where private decisions are suddenly exposed to public scrutiny. Surrounding them is a carefully constructed ensemble of intersecting stories, including a struggling film producer desperate to secure funding, a glamorous yet insecure actress fearing career decline, and a devoted elderly couple facing financial ruin, all portrayed by an impressive supporting cast that includes Maggie Smith in an early, scene-stealing performance. What makes the VIPs compelling is not explosive action, but emotional suspense. The film thrives on conversation, glances, shifting loyalties, and the claustrophobic tension of time suspended. The airport lounge itself becomes almost theatrical in design, representing a liminal space between past choices and uncertain futures. Burton's performance radiates controlled fury and wounded pride, while Taylor brings vulnerability layered beneath her composed exterior, reflecting the couple's real-life chemistry that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The screenplay explores themes of power, dependency, pride, and the illusion of control among the elite, quietly critiquing the emotional emptiness that can accompany wealth and status. Visually, the film embraces polished studio aesthetics, emphasizing luxury, tailored suits, elegant gowns, and the performative nature of high society. Upon release, The VIPs was a commercial success, largely driven by the magnetic appeal of its leads and the public obsession with their relationship. Maggie Smith won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, cementing her arrival as a formidable talent. While some critics viewed the film as melodramatic, others appreciated its character-driven structure and layered interpersonal dynamics. In the broader landscape of 1963 cinema, dominated by epics and grand spectacles, the VIPs proved that tension could thrive in confined spaces, relying on performance and dialogue rather than scale.
Today, it stands as a fascinating time capsule of star power, celebrity culture, and classic studio-era storytelling, capturing a moment when glamour and emotional vulnerability coexisted under the harsh lights of public fascination. It remains an understated yet absorbing drama that turns a simple flight delay into a revealing study of human pride and longing.
Love with the Proper Stranger, 1963. In a year filled with spectacle and star-driven dramas, Love with the Proper Stranger quietly broke ground by tackling themes that mainstream Hollywood rarely approached with honesty, particularly unplanned pregnancy and emotional responsibility outside marriage. Directed by Robert Mulligan and starring Natalie Wood and Steve McQueen, the film blends romantic drama with social realism, creating a character-driven story that feels remarkably modern, even decades later. Wood plays Angie Rossini, a young Italian-American sales clerk living with her traditional family in New York City, who finds herself pregnant after a brief encounter with a struggling jazz musician, Rocky Papasano, portrayed by McQueen with understated vulnerability. What begins as an awkward reunion between two near strangers slowly evolves into a nuanced exploration of maturity, accountability, and the complicated line between obligation and genuine affection. The film's strength lies in its refusal to sensationalize its subject matter. Instead of melodrama, it leans into emotional authenticity, showing Angie's fear, pride, and independence while exposing Rocky's initial immaturity and gradual transformation. McQueen, often associated with cool detachment, delivers one of his most layered performances here, revealing insecurity beneath bravado. Natalie Wood anchors the film with a performance that balances fragility and fierce self-respect, earning her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. The screenplay handles sensitive topics with surprising frankness for its era, subtly critiquing societal expectations placed on women while avoiding preachiness. Scenes between Angie and her tightly knit family add cultural texture, highlighting generational differences and the pressure of reputation within immigrant communities. The black and white cinematography enhances the film's grounded tone, giving New York City a lived-in authenticity that contrasts sharply with the polished studio gloss of many contemporaries. Upon release, the film was praised for its mature storytelling and chemistry between its leads, though its subject matter was considered bold by early 1960 standards. It earned multiple Academy Award nominations, including Best Actress and Best Art Direction, signaling industry recognition of its artistic merit. Beyond its romantic arc, the film quietly questions what love truly means. Is it passion, responsibility, sacrifice, or growth? Rather than offering a fairy tale resolution, it presents emotional evolution as the real triumph. In the broader context of 1963 cinema, Love with the Proper Stranger stands out as a transitional work pointing toward the more socially conscious films that would define the later 1960s. Today, it feels less like a dated melodrama and more like a thoughtful precursor to modern relationship dramas, proving that sincerity and character depth can resonate far longer than spectacle. It remains one of the most emotionally intelligent romantic dramas of its time, capturing a moment when Hollywood cautiously began reflecting real-life complexities on screen.
The Ugly American, 1963. At the height of Cold War anxiety, The Ugly American arrived as one of 1963's most politically charged dramas, daring to critique American foreign policy while global tensions were still painfully real. Directed by George Englund and starring Marlon Brando, the film adapts the controversial 1958 novel by William J. Lederer and Eugene Burdick, a book that exposed the cultural arrogance and strategic blindness of U.S. diplomacy in Southeast Asia. Brando plays Harrison Carter Mack White, an intellectual and reluctant academic unexpectedly appointed as U.S. ambassador to the fictional Southeast Asian country of Sarkon, a thinly veiled stand-in for Vietnam. Unlike traditional heroic portrayals of American leadership, Mack White is depicted as thoughtful yet flawed, navigating a volatile political landscape filled with coups, insurgencies, propaganda warfare, and ideological manipulation. What makes the film compelling is its refusal to offer simple solutions. Instead, it presents diplomacy as a chessboard where miscommunication and cultural ignorance can have devastating consequences. Brando delivers a restrained and cerebral performance, stepping away from his usual explosive intensity to portray a man attempting to balance integrity with national pressure. The film's title reflects not crude behavior, but a broader critique of systemic arrogance, the assumption that American values can be imposed without understanding local complexities. As Mack White grapples with corrupt officials, rising communist influence, and mistrust among the Sarkon people, the narrative subtly questions whether good intentions alone are enough in geopolitics. Released just as U.S. involvement in Vietnam was escalating, the film felt uncomfortably timely, and its themes have only grown more relevant with hindsight.
Visually, the film maintains a sober tone, avoiding flashy spectacle in favor of dialogue-driven confrontations and tense political exchanges. Supporting performances strengthen the narrative, portraying both American and Sarkhan characters as multidimensional rather than caricatures. Critics at the time offered mixed reactions, with some praising its bravery and others viewing it as overly talkative, but many acknowledged its intellectual ambition. Commercially, it did not dominate the box office like lighter fare that year, yet it carved out a reputation as a serious adult drama willing to challenge its audience. In retrospect, The Ugly American feels prophetic, foreshadowing the cultural misunderstandings and policy failures that would soon define American involvement in Southeast Asia. Within the broader landscape of 1963 cinema, a year of epics, romances, and glamorous dramas, this film stood apart as a sober reflection on power and responsibility. Today, it remains a fascinating political time capsule, offering insight into a moment when Hollywood cautiously began questioning the narrative of American infallibility. It may not be flashy, but its quiet intensity and moral complexity make it one of the year's most thought-provoking hidden gems.
The Prize, 1963. Blending intellectual prestige with espionage thrills, The Prize is one of 1963's most entertaining genre crossovers, combining mystery, political paranoia, and romantic tension against the elegant backdrop of the Nobel Prize ceremonies in Stockholm. Directed by Mark Robson and based on Irving Wallace's best-selling novel, the film centers on Andrew Craig, a once brilliant novelist played by Paul Newman, who arrives in Sweden to receive his Nobel Prize in Literature while battling writer's block and a growing dependence on alcohol. What begins as a sophisticated gathering of global intellectual elites quickly spirals into intrigue when one of the laureates mysteriously disappears and is seemingly replaced by an imposter. As suspicions mount, Andrew finds himself drawn into a web of Cold War espionage involving secret identities, political defection, and hidden surveillance beneath the polished veneer of international celebration. Newman brings effortless charm and sardonic wit to Andrew, balancing cynicism with reluctant heroism as he shifts from disinterested observer to active investigator. Opposite him, L.K. Sommer delivers a poised and engaging performance as his ally, adding both romantic chemistry and narrative momentum. The film's tone cleverly oscillates between suspense and humor, allowing moments of lighthearted banter to coexist with genuine tension. Visually, The Prize benefits from its European setting, showcasing grand hotels, formal banquets, and shadowy corridors that heighten the sense of elegance masking danger. The screenplay uses the Nobel Prize ceremony not just as decoration, but as thematic irony, juxtaposing humanity's greatest intellectual achievements with its ongoing political deception and mistrust. Released during peak Cold War uncertainty, the film taps into contemporary fears about infiltration and ideological conflict without becoming overly heavy or didactic. Critics at the time praised Newman's charismatic performance and the film's polished production values, though some noted its length and layered plot as ambitious for a mainstream thriller. Commercially, it performed solidly, appealing to audiences who enjoyed espionage dramas but wanted something more sophisticated than a straightforward spy adventure. What makes The Prize particularly interesting today is how it captures early 1960s anxieties through the lens of glamour and intelligence rather than brute force, presenting espionage as psychological chess rather than action spectacle. In the broader cinematic landscape of 1963, surrounded by Western epics and romantic dramas, this film offered a stylish alternative, a thinking person's thriller wrapped in tuxedos and diplomatic smiles. Over time, it has become an underrated gem for fans of classic suspense, demonstrating that even among the world's brightest minds, ambition and ideology can cast long shadows. It remains a sleek, engaging reminder that brilliance does not guarantee innocence, and that even the most prestigious stage can conceal secrets waiting to unravel.
Toys in the Attic, 1963. Toys in the Attic is a deeply atmospheric and psychologically charged drama that explores the fragile boundaries between love, control, and emotional dependency within a decaying Southern family structure. Directed by George Roy Hill and adapted by Lillian Hellman's acclaimed stage play, the film unfolds primarily inside a single household in New Orleans, where returning prodigal son Julian Berniers, played by Dean Martin, arrives with his wife Lily, portrayed by Geraldine Page, only to find himself entangled in a suffocating web of familial obsession and unresolved emotional manipulation. At the center of this psychological storm are Julian's two unmarried sisters, Carrie and Anna, played with haunting intensity by Wendy Hiller and Yvette Mimeo, whose devotion to their brother borders on emotional captivity. What begins as a family reunion slowly transforms into a claustrophobic psychological battleground where affection becomes possessiveness and loyalty mutates into destructive control.
Geraldine Page delivers one of the most powerful performances of her career, portraying Lily as a woman caught between dignity and emotional erosion, struggling to maintain her identity while being subtly dismantled by the family's psychological dominance. Dean Martin, often associated with charm and light entertainment, surprises with a restrained and serious performance that reveals vulnerability beneath his composed exterior. The film's tone is deliberately oppressive, using confined interiors, dim lighting, and heavy silences to create a sense of emotional suffocation that mirrors the character's psychological entrapment. Unlike conventional melodramas, Toys in the Attic does not rely on external conflict, but instead builds tension through dialogue, pauses, and unspoken resentment that accumulates with each passing scene. Lillian Hellman's writing infuses the narrative with themes of repression, incestuous emotional attachment, and the destructive nature of idealized devotion, making it one of the more daring adaptations of its time. George Roy Hill's direction maintains a theatrical intensity while still utilizing cinematic techniques to heighten emotional proximity, ensuring that every confrontation feels intimate and unavoidable. Upon release, the film received strong critical praise, particularly for Geraldine Page's performance, which earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. However, its heavy subject matter limited its mainstream commercial appeal, as audiences of the early 1960s were still adjusting to more psychologically complex storytelling. In the broader context of 1963 cinema, Toys in the Attic stands out as a quietly unsettling exploration of family dysfunction, contrasting sharply with the year's more expansive epics and romantic narratives. Over time, it has gained recognition as a significant example of Southern Gothic cinema, where emotional decay and moral ambiguity replace traditional plot-driven storytelling. Today, it is remembered as a haunting study of how love, when distorted by isolation and obsession, can become a force of psychological imprisonment rather than comfort. Its slow-burning tension and emotional depth continue to resonate, making it one of the most powerful and underrated dramas of its era.
Captain Newman, M.D., 1963. Captain Newman, M.D. is a unique blend of war drama, psychological study, and dark comedy that explores the emotional toll of combat through the lens of military psychiatry during World War II. Directed by David Miller and based on Leo Rosten's novel, the film is set in a U.S. Army Air Base hospital in 1944, where Captain Josiah J. Newman, played by Gregory Peck, leads a psychiatric ward dedicated to treating soldiers suffering from combat fatigue, what would later be recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder. Unlike traditional war films focused on battlefield heroics, this story takes place in the quieter but equally intense psychological battlefield of the human mind. Newman is portrayed as a compassionate and dedicated doctor who believes in treating his patients with empathy, patience, and unconventional methods, often clashing with military bureaucracy that prioritizes discipline and efficiency over mental recovery. Opposing or complicating his work is Major Yossarian-like energy embodied by Captain Benjamin Tiger Barney, played by Tony Curtis, a cynical yet insightful flight surgeon who becomes both assistant and moral counterbalance to Newman's idealism. The film also features powerful supporting performances, including Bobby Darin as a deeply traumatized young gunner and Robert Duvall in one of his early screen appearances as a troubled airman, each contributing to the emotional mosaic of wartime psychological breakdown. What makes the film particularly compelling is its tonal balance, shifting between humor, melancholy, and stark emotional truth without undermining the seriousness of its subject matter. Gregory Peck delivers a grounded and humane performance, portraying Newman not as a flawless hero, but as a man struggling to maintain hope in an environment saturated with trauma. The film addresses themes of guilt, fear, repression, and recovery, showing that emotional wounds can be as devastating as physical injuries. Its depiction of psychiatric treatment during World War II reflects both the limitations and emerging understanding of mental health care in military settings. Visually, the film avoids large-scale battle sequences, instead focusing on hospital interiors, patient interactions, and intimate character moments that reveal the psychological aftermath of war. Upon release, Captain Newman, M.D. was praised for its sensitive storytelling and strong ensemble performances, earning Academy Award nominations for supporting actors and recognition for its screenplay. It stood apart from traditional war films of its time by emphasizing emotional rehabilitation over combat action, offering audiences a more introspective perspective on wartime service. In the broader context of 1963 cinema, it represents a shift toward character-driven narratives that explore internal conflict rather than external victory.
Today, the film is appreciated for its early and compassionate portrayal of combat-related psychological trauma, a subject that would gain far greater attention in later decades. It remains a thoughtful, sometimes humorous, and deeply human portrait of doctors and soldiers navigating the invisible wounds of war, closing the 1963 lineup on a note of reflection, resilience, and emotional truth.
1963 wasn't just a year of films, it was a year of transformation and big stars, bold ideas, and hidden gems all collided in one unforgettable era. Even today, their impact still echoes through modern filmmaking styles and themes. What once seemed ordinary in 1963 now feels like timeless cinematic history. And these 10 films prove that true classics never really fade away.